San Francisco, 1906. They called it the Paris of the West. It was a city born from the wild, lawless days of the gold rush, transformed over 50 years into a glittering metropolis of cable cars, grand Victorian mansions, and boundless ambition. By the dawn of the 20th century, nearly 400,000 people called this peninsula home. They lived in a gilded age of theater, fine dining, and unimaginable wealth, completely unaware that their paradise was built on a foundation of sheer terror. But beneath the cobblestone streets, beneath the elegant facades and the bustling ports, a sleeping giant was about to wake. It was Wednesday, April 18th. At 5:12 in the morning, the city was mostly asleep. The air was crisp, and the sky over the bay was just beginning to turn a soft, hazy pink. The gas lamps flickered, and the first streetcars were preparing to roll. And then, without a single warning sign, the earth roared. For 45 terrifying seconds, the San Andreas Fault ripped open over 290 miles. To the people being violently thrown from their beds in the pitch dark, it felt like the absolute end of the world. The ground didn't just shake, it rolled like the enormous waves of the ocean, rising in swells of earth that lifted streets and dropped them back down in shattered pieces. Magnificent, multi-story brick buildings collapsed like houses of cards. The Grand City Hall, a monument of civic pride that took 20 long years and millions of dollars to build, was reduced to a skeletal ruin of twisted iron and dust in less than a minute. The deafening sound of shattering glass, crumbling masonry, and the screams of the terrified filled the morning air. Thousands were instantly trapped beneath the heavy rubble of their own homes. But as the choking dust began to settle over the shattered streets, and the sun finally rose, the survivors crawling out of the debris thought the worst was over. They hugged their loved ones, looked at their ruined homes, and thanked God they were alive. They were tragically wrong. The earthquake, as catastrophic as it was merely the prologue. The true monster was just waking up. As the citizens looked out over their broken city, a new, far more terrifying sound began to echo through the unnatural silence, the crackle of flames. Deep underground, the violent shaking had snapped the city's complex network of gas lines like dry twigs, filling the air with highly flammable fumes. But more devastatingly, the quake had completely shattered the water mains. The city's lifeline was severed. In the Hayes Valley neighborhood, a woman, shivering in the cold morning air, tried to make a simple breakfast of ham and eggs for her terrified family on a stove with a damaged chimney. That single, innocent spark ignited the wooden walls of her home. Within minutes, the house was entirely consumed. This blaze, forever known in history as the ham and eggs fire, was just one of over 50 separate fires erupting simultaneously across the ruined city. The San Francisco Fire Department, hailed as one of the best and most disciplined in the world, rushed to the scenes with their heavy, horse-drawn engines. But when the brave firemen desperately connected their heavy canvas hoses to the hydrants and turned the valves, nothing happened. Not a single drop of water came out. The pressure was gone. To make matters infinitely worse, the fire chief, Dennis Sullivan, the only man who had foreseen this exact nightmare and had desperately begged the city to build saltwater pumping stations, had been mortally wounded by a falling chimney in his bed during the initial quake. Leaderless, disorganized, and entirely without water, the firemen were forced to stand back and watch helplessly as the separate flames began to merge into an uncontrollable beast. By midday, the individual fires had joined into a towering, roaring inferno. A massive wall of solid fire began to march relentlessly across the city, consuming everything in its path with unimaginable speed. The heat generated by the burning city was so intense it created its own localized weather system, sucking in gale-force winds that threw burning embers and flaming debris blocks away, igniting even more homes in untouched neighborhoods. Panic set in. People grabbed whatever they could carry, dragging heavy trunks down the steep, cracked hills, fleeing before the advancing wall of flames. But as the situation grew completely desperate, the military stepped in. General Frederick Funston, a decorated but aggressive officer, effectively declared martial law. Seeing that water was useless, he made a desperate, agonizing decision: if they couldn't put the fire out, they would starve it of fuel. The plan was to dynamite entire blocks of standing, unburned mansions to create a massive firebreak, a gap the flames couldn't cross. It was a brutal strategy, but it might have worked, if they had the right men and the right explosives. Instead, it became a catastrophic miscalculation that doomed the city. Using highly volatile black powder instead of proper, controlled dynamite, and handled by soldiers untrained in demolition, the explosions didn't just level the buildings. They acted as massive incendiary bombs. The blasts blew flaming debris high into the air, actively spreading the fire into the very neighborhoods they were trying to save. Eyewitnesses reported seeing soldiers accidentally setting fire to block after block of pristine homes. The city was no longer just burning, it was being actively blown up. For 3 agonizing days and nights, San Francisco burned with a brightness that could be seen from space. The sky was stained a permanent, hellish red, and the ash fell like black snow on ships miles out at sea. When the smoke finally mercifully cleared on the 4th day, the Paris of the West was gone. In its place was nothing more than a vast, smoldering graveyard of ash, twisted iron, and shattered dreams. The scale of the destruction is still difficult to comprehend. Nearly 500 city blocks, encompassing over 28,000 buildings, were completely wiped from existence. While the official death toll at the time was kept artificially low by politicians desperate to keep investors from fleeing, modern historians estimate that over 3,000 souls perished in the flames and the collapse. And a staggering 227,000 people, more than half the city's entire population, were suddenly left entirely homeless, with nothing but the soot-stained clothes on their backs. Yet, amidst the unimaginable ruin and the lingering smell of smoke, the true spirit of the city refused to die. The vast, green expanse of Golden Gate Park was transformed overnight into a massive, sprawling refugee camp of canvas tents and makeshift shelters. In this temporary city of survivors, the rigid social classes of the Gilded Age simply vanished. Rich socialites and poor immigrants stood side by side in long breadlines, sharing what little they had. They cooked whatever food they had miraculously salvaged on makeshift stoves in the middle of the cracked streets. They didn't abandon their shattered home. Instead, they promised to build it back, stronger, safer, and more magnificent than before. The 1906 disaster remains a chilling testament to the overwhelming, unstoppable power of nature, but also to the incredible, unbreakable resolve of the human spirit when faced with absolute annihilation. It is a story of a city that was forced to burn itself to the ground, only to rise again from the ashes, a true phoenix of the American West. Do you have family roots in the Bay Area, or ancestors who lived through the trials of the early 20th century? What stories of survival, resilience, or rebuilding against impossible odds have been passed down in your own family? Let us know in the comments below. Your history is America's history, and we want to hear it.